Hey guys, I've decided to start another ongoing series. In this series, I'll cover a bunch of forms of media I enjoyed over the season, this time being winter. This is just going to be a cool excuse to talk about things that I haven't talked about before on this channel. That includes games, albums, shows, still movies too of course, but yeah, this was inspired by the Super Eye Patch Wolf videos with the same format, and this will hopefully be an ongoing series in the near future. Anyways, let's just get right into it. I really liked Portal. I thought it was very fun. I don't have a lot to say on it since it's a pretty simple game, but I barely played any games during winter, so I'll talk about Portal for the sake of it. I bought the Portal games since they're like $2, plus I've heard very good things about Portal 2, but I figured I would play the first game first. I think the Portal mechanic is maybe one of the coolest puzzle gimmicks ever. It's pretty much iconic at this point, and despite only having 17 levels, Portal was able to explore so many cool concepts with this one simple mechanic. I thought this game was great for its 17 levels, featuring super creative and never boring puzzles. However, once we get past the first 17 levels, the game starts to add a narrative, and it started to lose me a bit. This stretch of the game is just nowhere near as interesting as the start, and a little more frustrating with its mechanics. Plus, I really didn't care for the final boss fight. It's just pretty uninteresting and repetitive. Still though, this was a very good game. If Portal 2 can be more engaging and creative, then it'll probably be peak, because the Portal mechanic is an actual goldmine of possibilities. I literally beat this game directly on New Year's, like at 1 AM on January 1st. Anyways, this is the first Metal Gear Solid game I played, and it's amazing. I played this a while ago, so I don't have as much to say as I would like, but I still got some stuff. One of the best parts about this whole game, besides the gameplay, is Snake Eater's characters. Naked Snake is a great protagonist with some great comedy. Ocelot is maybe the coolest guy ever. The actual team Snake works with is very enjoyable, besides maybe Sigint, who isn't too interesting. Eva is a great character, her role in the ending is really great, and the slow progression of how the game treats her shows a lot of Snake's character growth without ever really saying anything. The boss is one of my favorite villains ever. Her growth and general death leads to one of the hardest hitting endings I've maybe ever seen. I love how this game uses the soldiers the boss leads as metaphors for the base emotions the boss has. As you go throughout the game and kill her best soldiers, you're fundamentally erasing her emotions and closest friends. It hits hard. All the actual soldiers or bosses in this game are great. Bosses like Vogan, the End, and the Fury really stand out to me as being really creative and out there. The End is easily my favorite boss in the whole game. It's such a creative fight, being on survival skills instead of hand-to-hand combat. I really like how despite this game being so grounded in reality, we still get some of the most insane characters, like the Fury being a spaceman who is constantly on fire, or a literal dead man taking you down into the afterlife to face your sins. The game has its issues, the gameplay has improved so much from the original form, but for some reason during the final fight they bring back the original gameplay and it really sucks. Like, I don't know how anyone played with these camera angles, it's so bad. Also, the game is really easy, but that's not really a complaint, so whatever. Amazing game. Definitely gonna start going through the other Metal Gear Solid games now because this is actual peak. Dandadan has kind of become one of the most popular talked about animes and shows last year. I've been watching it very slowly since it came out, since for me it took a while for the show to really grow on me. I really enjoyed this show and I wanted to talk about it on this channel, not only for it being one of the most talked about shows last year that I completely missed, but also because, well, I actually have stuff to talk about. I found the first 3 episodes of the show to be pretty weak. They were okay, but the aggressive fan service and goofy tone did not work for me. However, as the show went on, the characters, specifically our 2 main leads, Okrun and Momo, really grew on me. I think they have a really well written bond, and as the 2 leads got better, the show itself got a lot better. Found the humor to really start to land, and the action and general quality went up a lot. It's still a bit of a rough ride. There are some pretty good highs during the show, but also still some, well, not lows, but again, the show has a lot of unnecessary fan service that gets old really quick. They kind of stop it after the beginning of the show, which is fine, but it starts to come back later on, which is kind of annoying. For more general points, I really like the demons and aliens in the show. Turbo Granny might just be my favorite part of the entire series so far. I love how she continues to stick around in like 5 different forms throughout the entire show for no reason. The other demons for the most part are fine. I forgot about a lot of them, and an episode having a less interesting alien or demon led the episode themselves to feel weaker overall, which did drag the show down a lot. The aliens are really great, and I honestly do prefer them over the demons since they're so much more out there and goofy. Like, I love the fighting guy with the depressing backstory and the Godzilla creature. However, at the same time, they are really weird and could be toned down a bit, but I do think that in this case the positives outweigh the negatives. Besides all the actual good stuff, I just really enjoyed the wacky tone of this show. It really adds to the comedy, which is solid for the most part. I also really liked how the show presented the concept of a new alien or demon that the leads had to deal with each episode, though they don't really stick with that concept since there's usually more than one episode on each alien or demon. Still, when it does run like that, I found it to work pretty well. For the most part, this was a very solid, good show. Hope to see improvements as it goes along. For my favorite episodes, I'm gonna have to go with Kind Your World, obviously the best written and animated episode of the show. Gave a lot of cool backstory and by far hit me the hardest. Second place would be Kicking Turbo Granny's Ass. This was the point in the show where it got really good. It's got some amazing animation and where the show is at its most funny and ridiculous, making it thoroughly enjoyable. Lastly and third would be I've Got This Funny Feeling. Most of my enjoyment came from the two leads, but also the aliens, which were really fun. My least favorite in the show is going to be the ending episode. It's mostly fine, but functions as a really boring conclusion, and that's a bigger issue than anything else in the whole show. Overall, Dan to Dan was a very good show. We'll watch season 2 for sure. Also, I almost forgot this, but the opening is obviously very, very good. It absolutely peaks in like its last 45 seconds. I've been watching Invincible since season 2 dropped, and it is still by far one of my favorite shows airing right now. To get my issues for this season out of the way, just like everyone is saying, the animation is quite weak. However, the last 2 episodes definitely explain where all that budget went, and frankly, it was kinda worth it slugging through the bad animation to get to those final 2 episodes. Still, even in those last 2 episodes, there are some strange moments in animation, so overall, despite its highs, the animation still takes a real noticeable decrease in quality during the season. For general characters, Rex is great, and maybe even better than he was in season 2. Oliver is a very good new character thrown into the show. Mark's arc isn't nearly as good as season 2 for me, but it's still a very unique, darker end for the season. Plus, characters like Ciso getting more focus was nice. I really like the episode detailing his backstory and having to commit to immoral acts to save the world, along with a lot of this season being on Ciso and Mark's complicated relationship. Characters like Alan and Omni-Man are amazing as always. They really don't get a lot of screen time this season, but whenever we do see them, it's peak. Besides the Ciso and Omni-Man plots, the rest of the season's stories are just very solid, so I really don't have a lot to say. However, this doesn't apply to the last 2 episodes, which are insane and the peak of the entire season and some of the best from the entire show. What Have I Done, the semi-season finale, is an insane step up in stakes. Throwing in 16 Invincibles is crazy, along with Stephen Young giving a different, unique performance for all of them. Angstrom is one of my favorite villains in the whole series, so seeing him again was cool. It kinda sucks his partial humanity is fully gone now, since that was his best character trait, but he's still an intimidating force. Then we have the season finale. Conquest, probably my favorite character in the entire show. He is somehow able to get to that point in only 45 minutes of screen time. I love how he's able to be this unstoppable, purely evil force, perfectly living up to that paranoia around Viltrumites that has been built up since the season 1 finale, but at the same time, Conquest is more interesting than just an unstoppable force. He's also an interesting character for how lonely and depressed he is, only knowing violence because it's all he's seen as. That lonely monologue he gives Mark isn't even in the comics, and it fits perfectly with his character. For favorite episodes, I'll go with I Thought You Never Shut Up, the season finale. Amazing action, they absolutely blew all the budget here. Conquest is amazing, as said before. Additionally, it's the end of Mark's arc and one of my favorites from the whole show. Next would be What Have I Done, the semi-series finale for the season. It also has amazing action, a great arc end for Rex, and a really chaotic, brutal step up in stakes. Lastly is You Are My Hero. Mark's plot is great, and the Alan and Omni-Man plot is actual peak. The twist at the end is crazy. Lastly, my least favorite from the show would have to be This Was Supposed to Be Easy. I still think this episode is pretty good, but yeah, the animation here is by far at its worst and kind of ruins all the action we do get. Overall, this was an amazing season. The weak animation holds it back a lot and drags down a lot of the already kind of uninteresting episodes, but besides that, it's still amazing and has some of the highest highs this show has had so far. This show has not missed yet, so I'm still very, very excited for season 4.
Verbal culture, parkour with the metaphors, the flow house, the horror, the voter with metal doors. Hence, bitch, 6 cents with a no strip.
I've wanted to check out Atrocity Exhibition for a while once I started getting into Danny Brown. I discovered Danny Brown through his collabs with Kodeka and Femtino, and I've been really into him since. I listened to his collab album with JPEG Mafia, which I thought was great from everything I've heard. Danny Brown is just such a creative, out there rapper. Atrocity Exhibition has gotten so much praise and hype, being one of the highest rated hip hop albums of all time, so I was bound to check it out eventually. As expected, this project is very, very experimental. Danny experiments with some borderline nightmarish tracks. A lot of the these songs are kind of unlistenable. There are some bizarre beats that complement his crazy vocals very well. It's so interesting that Danny's kind of iconic rap voice isn't even his actual voice. There are some songs on here like Tell Me What I Don't Know that feature Danny's normal voice, and it's so different and normal compared to his yelpy high-pitched rapping on most of his other songs. I gotta say, his high-pitched voice is actually a lot better, though it does take a while to get used to. Most of this album for me is just very good, with a couple weak tracks here and there like Get High, which I don't care for. It's a pretty boring song that is honestly more boring than unlistenable, which made me dislike it a lot more. You just cannot make an uninteresting song on such an insane album. Besides that, everything else ranged from good to great. The song that I knew was going to be amazing going in was Really Though. It was the only song I heard from the project before listening to the whole thing. Kendrick and Earl's Sweatshirt's verses are amazing, but for me, the section that stands out the most is honestly Danny's verse at the start. It might be his best vocal delivery. Really Though is my favorite song on first listen, but as time has gone on, the song that might be the best on this project is When It Rained, an absolute banger that really grew in me after multiple listens. It's absolutely mind-blowing what Danny is able to do with such a seemingly simple song. I feel like I also have to mention this for how praised it is, but Ain't It Funny is also great. However, it's not my favorite off the album. I did prefer other songs like Rolling Stone over it. Still though, Ain't It Funny is probably the most chaotic, hellish feeling song on the record, which makes it stand out. Overall, I thought this album was great. I thoroughly enjoyed Atrocity Exhibition, and if you really want to destroy your ears, I highly recommend this one.
All's my life I has to fight, nigga. All's my life
I heard To Pimp a Butterfly on January 1st is the first thing I started 2025 with, if you ignore Metal Gear Solid. It's a little difficult to talk about this one since it's not really fresh in my mind, but I kinda gotta, right? It's literally the highest rated album of all time on Album of the Year. How can I not? It definitely lived up to the hype for me. It's one of the best hip-hop albums I've ever heard. I mean, to be honest, I haven't heard nearly enough hip-hop albums to call it one of the best, but still. It's really strange hearing a Kendrick album that is this uplifting. It feels very different from his other albums. I mean, obviously we go through Kendrick's struggles, but it's got an optimistic view that really flows throughout these songs. I won't get into them since I already did a full video on every Kendrick song, but the main standouts for me throughout this album were Wesley's Theory, I, The Blacker the Berry, King Kuta, Mortal Man, and of course Alright, being one of the best songs Kendrick has ever made. Alright just kind of captures To Pimp a Butterfly as a whole. It's the song to come off this album. For issues, I don't love all the songs on here for being too experimental. I initially liked Institutionalized, but as time has gone on, it's definitely grown off me. This also applies to a couple of other songs that I don't find to be interesting, like Mama or You Ain't Gotta Lie. Anyways, I heard this album a while ago for my Kendrick video, and I kinda said everything I wanted to in that video, but I feel like I had to include it here since this is one of the best things I heard / watched this season. It's my second favorite Kendrick album because, I don't know, I like Mr. Morale more, fight me.
It's December, I'll be better and find another full face. After one is hardly over.
My first introduction to Naomi, the artist behind Chi Chi, was a year or so ago when I found Bunnyland in my Spotify Discover Weekly. I thought it was pretty cool, so when I later saw this album on the Album of the Year page, I saved it and just decided to check it out around February, and it blew me away. This is probably my favorite album of 2024. I can't believe it took me so long to get to this one. If I had to describe the sound of this record, I would say it feels like a hyperpop Undertale mashup. There's a clear love for Undertale throughout all these songs, with the very close sounding instruments and direct references to Undertale with lyrics like "But the Earth refused to die." This might sound weird and off-putting for a lot of people, but I love Toby Fox's music, so it doesn't really apply to me. I mean, I've already done 2 videos on Deltarune's OST, and I also love hyperpop, so for me, this is just kind of the perfect mix of sounds to create an incredible listening experience. While I don't fully have the story of this album put together, I'll try to explain it as best as I can. Chi Chi follows, well, Chi Chi and the grief she goes through after her friend dies. Already based off this subject matter, this sounds like a really dark album, and it is. However, what's interesting is that this album is coded with a happy, bright tone, while the lyrics are as suicidal and dark as they get. I found this angle to really work, like how the world itself doesn't seem to change from Chi Chi's friend's death and only Chi Chi's affected. A lot of this is assumption though. The story of this album is pretty vague. We never get details on the actual death. We only hear this album from Chi Chi's mind, like her constant paranoia, fear, and anger around the situation. The only way to get details on this story is by going through the blog linked in Naomi's bio, which is really vague and obscure like an ARG. I actually went through some of the blog while listening to parts of this album, which honestly really added to the experience because the music from this album fits perfectly perfectly with the blog itself. It does take a while for the story of this project to grow on you, but the finale song for this album titled December is what really sells it. It might just be my favorite song of 2024. While I don't have the story fully figured out, December is clearly on Chi Chi finally deciding to move on from her friend's death, and it hits like a truck. It is one of the most beautiful, uplifting songs I've heard. Plus, it's also probably a reference to the December holidays, so that adds. Overall, this was an amazing album. If I give it another re-listen, especially with the album movie, it could become one of my favorite albums of all time. No one seems to be talking about this one, so you should check it out now. This is gonna be the only movie in this video because, like, I talk about movies enough. I feel like I gotta talk about Seven Samurai because I'm not sure when I'm ever gonna find the opportunity to talk about this classic on my channel again, so I might as well do it now. Seven Samurai is one of the highest rated films of all time from one of the most beloved directors of all time, Akira Kurosawa. This is a 3.5 hour long epic, so I had to watch this over the course of 2 days, which hopefully didn't ruin my experience. My favorite aspect of this film had to be its characters. For a movie with pretty low stakes, just being about samurai defending a village, we really get invested in this movie just based on how much time we spend with these characters, especially the Seven Samurai themselves. All that build-up really pays off when this movie begins killing off some of the samurai. You never really know who's gonna live or die in this battle, and it really leaves you on edge throughout the whole film. My favorite character in this movie is easily Kikuchiyo. He might just be the coolest loser I've ever seen in a film. It's so funny to me that at least an hour of this movie's runtime is solely dedicated to him doing funny shenanigans. I wouldn't write it any other way. Besides the characters, this movie has great action. There really is just 1 hour-long battle at the end of this film. It's extremely slow but so well put together that it becomes thoroughly engaging. Seeing these two armies go back and forth, slowly chipping away at each other, is super tense and enjoyable. Lastly, the ending is what made me give this a 9. It is one of the best shots I've seen in a while, a super powerful, bleak way to end this off. If you haven't already seen Seven Samurai, you gotta watch it. It's amazing. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Next month we'll have 2 kind of special videos, most likely, and thanks for watching, and this is an epic outro.
只有我守着安静的沙漠。